Okay, amazing. Welcome back. Welcome back. Yay, back from Tishrei. Well, it's Tishrei still here, but you know what I mean. From the bubble of the holidays. I was telling Yocheved, Sherry, that we're trying to get back into routine, but it doesn't just happen. It's not like switching the switch of a light switch, but we're starting to get back into the swing of things. And let's start with this class. So it's a good thing that this is right the day after Chag, so we can get into the routine of learning. What I want to do today, before we tackle chapter 11 of positivity bias, which is going to talk about a really important topic, which is making the choice to be positive and practicing that positivity very intentionally. I want to go back to a nice chapter that I found in this book that we covered. We didn't cover the whole book, but we've covered before, A Daily Dose of Pesukim of Bitachon. There is a chapter here, chapter 86, page 296, if anybody who's going to listen to the replay, if they have the book, if they want to look at it inside, where he's going to talk about having rock solid bitachon. And he's going to give us an example that is going to take us right to the topic of choosing to be positive. So here's how he goes. As you know, in this book, what Rabbi Sutton has done is he's taken verses from Tehillim and other parts of Tanakh. Towards the end of the book, there's other parts of Nevi'im that he takes, of the prophets. But mostly, a lot of it is from David HaMelech, from Psalms. And he gives us a chapter based on the learning on Bitachon that is based on that verse. So here he's telling us a chapter in Tehillim 125 that says the following: a song of ascents. Those who trust in Hashem are like Mount Zion that falters not, but abides forever. So a person who trusts in Hashem is like Mount Zion that doesn't falter, doesn't shake, right? Doesn't move, is rock solid, but rather abides forever. And here's what Rabbi Sutton tells us. He says that when David HaMelech compares a person with Bitachon to Mount Zion, what is he conveying? What is the message of this image, right? What is the imagery? Every time David HaMelech in Tehillim chooses different imagery, and we've talked about some of them, like the child in his mother's arm. The nursing child is very specific. There's certain imagery. It's not just poetic license. It's not because it sounds good, it's pretty, it rhymes, and no, it's because there's something precise that we are to learn from that image. Okay, so what is it about this mount? Not just any mount. First, a mountain, and then not just any mountain, but Mount Zion. Okay. How is a person with a heart full of trust in Hashem anything like a massive mound of cold rock, right? So here's what he says. The trait that they have in common, the person with Bitachon and the mountain, is their indestructible nature. Living things die, but mountains, as we know, endure, right? They're not as weak as, vegetation or other things in nature. Like a mountain is a mountain. Like it just doesn't just disappear, right? Okay. They were formed as part of the creation of the world and will remain in their place, immovable until the end of time. This is the power Bitachon confers on the person who clings to it. So a person with Bitachon has that characteristic of indestructibility of a mountain. There might be challenges, just as a mountain's existence can be challenged, right? It's not like, there could be an avalanche, there could be an explosion, there could be all sorts of things, but the mountain in its essence endures the challenges and remains a mountain. The Baal Bitachon, the master of Bitachon, endures his challenges too. It's not like, the challenges might come, right? This person endures his challenges and remains a faithful servant of Hashem. Then he says that a further element of this verse is that it doesn't speak only, as I said before, of mountains in general, but rather it specifically names Mount Zion. This refers obviously to Eretz Israel. Of course, I should have mentioned it. We didn't mention it, Yocheved. Like we were all in such a joyous celebratory mood about the good news that we got right before Shmini Atzeres, right? So our hearts and over the last 2 years, we've been so connected. Like it's our minds are totally with Eretz Israel constantly. It's nonstop, right? So So it's interesting that this is going to bring us the metaphor to compare us to the mountain, specifically in Eretz Israel, which, as Rabbi Sutton says here, is the center of all creation, right? It all started there. Therefore, among all the long-lasting mountains of the world, Mount Zion is the most solid and unwavering, right? If it's the paradigm of a mountain. Likewise, the person who trusts in Hashem has a core of unwavering strength. Like it's at its essence, right? It's who the person is, right? The person with bitachon is like we've talked about the analogy of like the bitachon being like this shield, right? Like we're completely, it's like an armor. There's also in the Beis HaLevi the analogy of the fortress, right? There's all these different ways to visualize it, right? The protective quality that bitachon has that protects us from harm and and from evil decrees and all these things. But here it's talking about something slightly different. Like the person with bitachon in itself is a very solid, strong person, right? That can withstand many things, and at its essence, it will be a strong entity. Okay. In addition, Mount Zion is where Hashem's Shekhinah dwells, right? So this is a beautiful, beautiful point. Although the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed, Hashem's presence, his Shekhinah, still dwells at the coastal, right? We know it's still there. It doesn't just leave us. The same is true for the Baal Bitachon. Even when he goes through times that seem dark and destructive, Hashem doesn't leave his side. So I want you to now take this imagery, and it's not just of the mountain, but it's the mountain of Hashem, as in the beautiful song by Yaakov Shweki, right? Like the Yerushalayim song, and it says the mountain of Hashem, right? So that's the mountain of Hashem, that his Shekhinah has never left that space. So now imagine the Baal Bitachon has Hashem with him. Hashem doesn't leave the Baal Bitachon, right? That's like there. Because again, we go back to the same thing we've discussed. We go back to the relationship because they are cemented together. Because he's a Baal Bitachon, that's what it means. It's that he's completely cemented to Hashem. Hashem can't leave him because the person engages in this relationship, right? Hashem hides when we don't look for him. It's the game of peekaboo, I see you. But when the person is engaged in looking for Hashem and being with Hashem and relying on Hashem, forget about it. Like they're one. He doesn't leave him, right? So Hashem, the Shekhinah doesn't leave his side. Furthermore, when a person feels that he has destroyed himself spiritually, God forbid, if he turns to Hashem, Hashem will dwell with him. So there's no such thing like, as we've talked so many times and it says in the Shar Bitachon in the seven qualities, the 7 Tanaim, the 7 principles, the 7 qualities of God, right? There's no such thing as deserving or undeserving. Hashem is extremely generous to deserving or the undeserving. So even if the person falters in whatever area of life it might be, he's with Hashem. Hashem is with him, right? With the bitachon is what takes Hashem with him, right? Filled with bitachon, we are Mount Zion. We are the mountain of Hashem. We're, and then he says we're Mount Everest, we're Rocky Mountains. He's talking, we're mountains, right? Meaning to say, nothing moves us away from Hashem, and nothing moves Hashem away from us, as the following story shows. Okay, and this is the story about how the rock solid bitachon can endure any trial. So the story he shares here is that there was a Rav, Eliezer Silver, who had been very, very involved in trying to save Jews during the Holocaust. And he was visiting a DP camp after the war. And at that DP camp, he met a man who later became an incredible Nazi hunter and Jewish activist, and dedicated many, many years of his life to this, and very important holy work, obviously. But he had given up Torah mitzvahs, which again, we can't ever judge anyone, let alone somebody from that generation, right? So, but in interacting with this person at some point, this Rav Silver asked this man about his decision, not in a mode of judgment, but kind of like just to understand what the man was feeling, what he had gone through, or whatever it was, right? And the man told him a story, right? And that kind of like explained his turning point in life. It was a friendly conversation. He told him a story that in the camp where he had been imprisoned, there was only one sitter. Somehow somebody had smuggled a sitter. There was only one sitter. And the man who owned it used to rent the siddur to people in exchange for a share of their bread rations. So in exchange for a tiny piece of bread. So this man, who later became an incredible Nazi hunter and an activist, his feeling was, and in observing this dynamic, how can someone who calls themselves observant in Torah mitzvahs stoop so low? How could he take bread from starving people who just wanted to pray? I decided, and it could have been also, he was probably much younger then, right? He made a decision at that point that if that's what it means to be religious, then I'm done with it. Like, I don't want to have to do with anything, I don't want to have to do with that. So Rabbi Silber listened to the story and flipped the story and offered him a different view. He said, wow, I hear, but I see also the people who were willing to give up their bread in order to pray, right? It's all what you focus on. I see the self-sacrifice and faith of all those people, not just the cruelty of the man who took their bread. So in this whole story, what one person interpreted as something very negative, right? Which maybe we can argue that it was, right? Another person, notwithstanding that, what they chose to focus on, right? And of course, we're not talking about the fact that, of course, one of them was in the horrific situation and the other one, just to kind of like learn a point that we're going to address in positivity bias in a second, right? The other person focused, zoomed in on, oh my goodness, look, in those horrific conditions, people were so thirsty and yearning to connect with their creator that they were willing to give up their bread just to have time with the siddur, with Hashem, right? Praising Hashem. What were those people, he says, if not mountains, steady, enduring, weathering every crushing blow that came their way? Only with Bitachon can a human being become a mountain. So he tells us here in the summary that again, David HaMelech compares the Baal Bitachon to a mountain because mountains last forever and cannot be moved. Specifically, Mount Zion, which is in Eretz Israel, because the Shekhinah dwells there, as it dwells with those who trust in Hashem. And the Shekhinah dwells even with the destroyed Beis HaMikdash, as it does with those who have damaged themselves spiritually but turned to Hashem. So when we are facing something that is worrisome or frightening, we can summon this image of a mountain, right? And specifically the Har HaBayis, and like we can summon this image of being in the mountain of Hashem with the Shekhinah. Imagine that your heart is just as solid and steadfast as the mountain. So now with that, we're going to jump into, I might do another chapter of this book if we get a chance today. That's also a little bit related, but I want to jump into chapter 11 of positivity bias that is going to touch upon this idea of positivity is a choice, okay? And that's kind of what we saw in the story of this man who was able to see within the negative of the story also something really, really positive. And it also highlights what we've said up until now in this book about, finding the redeeming qualities in everything. And if we try, we're always going to find them. So Rabbi Kalmenson tells us here that he opens a chapter with a story from Rabbi Levi Yitzhak of Berdichev, who was known as the attorney of the Yidden, okay? He was the Hasidic Rebbe who is known for always advocating for the Yidden. Like, so we have so many beautiful stories of the Berdichev Rav, always looking for a redeeming factor in the Jewish people. And here's one of them. He says that one time, Rabbi Levi Yitzhak met a Jew who was smoking on Shabbat. And as we know, smoking on Shabbat is prohibited. So he said to the man, my friend, perhaps you forgot that today is Shabbat. And the guy says, no, I know that it's Shabbat. Says the rabbi, perhaps you forgot or never learned that it's forbidden to smoke on Shabbat. Very possible, right? And the man says, no, I know that it is forbidden to smoke on Shabbat. Hearing this, Rabbi Levi Yitzhak turned his gaze upward and called out fervently. This is characteristic of Rabbi Levi Yitzhak. He says, Ribono shel olam, master of the world, who is like your people Israel? Even when I gave this Jew every opportunity to lie and mitigate his offense, he refused to do so. Where is such scrupulous honesty to be found in the whole world? Right? That's what he saw. Look, this person can't lie. The Jews don't lie, right? Forget about the Shabbat. Forget about breaking Shabbat. No, oh my gosh, the level of honesty, the level of keeping one of the 10 commandments that we're seeing here, right? I gave him every opportunity to cover up for himself and lie, and he didn't lie. So even in the face of such a brazen chutzpahdik, public dismissal of Torah law, Rabbi Levi Yitzhak made a point of finding something positive to focus on. Just like in the other story, this Rabbi Silver made a point to find something positive to focus on, right? This kind of redemptive vision, always able to find a hidden spark of goodness to build on, even in the worst circumstances, is a hallmark of the Hasidic worldview in general, and the Rebbe's positivity bias in particular, as we're going to see. So now we're going to see in different stories where the Rebbe shows us this in action. The first story is about a boy who, this was Shavuot of 1978, outside East 770 Eastern Parkway, right? In the Rebbe's synagogue, there was a boy who was wandering up and down the street or whatever, and in the wandering or whatever, he mistook the Rebbe for his father, perhaps, and he took the Rebbe's hand, thinking it was his father, and the Rebbe held his hand and continued walking with him. Still not realizing his mistake, the child took the Rebbe's coat and wiped his face on it. And after the mother realized what was going on and, kind of pulled the child and said, hey, here's mommy, like, hello. Okay. She was horrified. She was horrified, or maybe his father found it. I don't know. But after the woman realized what happened, the mother, she was horrified to hear what happened. And she wrote an apology letter to the Rebbe, exclaiming that she was pained by what had happened. She soon received her letter back with the Rebbe's response. And you can all imagine what the Rebbe's response is going to be like, right? No, nothing to be upset about. The Rebbe's response the Rebbe had written an exclamation and a question mark after the word pained, like pained, right? And he then added to it, he wrote, on the contrary, he brought me great pleasure. One cannot begin to measure the heartfulness, simplicity, innocence, and sincerity of a child, if only half these qualities could be found in adults. And it's so true, by the way. I want to stop here for a second, right? If, one of the tactics of the Yetzer Hara specifically affects this topic of Bitachon and our practice of Bitachon constantly, is this cynicism, right? This lack of simplicity, right? Tamimus, like just, we were, and I should say, actually, we're doing today's shiur for the Refuah Shlema of Rafael Naftali ben Chanatzivia. And if anybody has any other names, feel free to unmute yourself and share them or put them in the chat, and I will say, I forgot to mention at the beginning. So it reminds me that recently, Sherry, you weren't there, but we were at the event that was marking the 11th yortzeit of our dear friend Mendel Kotler, Alava Shalom, and Mendy Marinovsky spoke beautifully, and he was talking about Mendel's beautiful qualities. And one of the things that he mentioned as, again, things that we need to take on, right? Like we need to learn, as the Rebbe told us, like the living need to learn. And, this is, we have to learn these things and live by them. And one of the things we can learn is, he said, the lack of cynicism, the sincerity. We as adults, we become very, quote unquote, sophisticated, right? We're connoisseurs. We explain things. We're like, no, how could this be? And come on, this story. And Mendy was saying, you take a child like Mendel, right? At 11, 12, 13 years old, he was always like that, right? Where you told them a story of the Baal Shem Tov, you told them a story from the Gemara, you told them a story from Rabbi Levi Yitzhak, and he took it with such gusto and such, like, every detail of the story was so internalized and so, no questioning, no trying to be, none of that. Again, it's cynicism that adults often have. Like, oh, it's a Baba Meiser. Oh, well, really? Could the tzaddik do that? Oh, really? But like, right? We try to explain so many things, and we do it all the time, right? The Yetzer Hara comes and tells us, oh, really? Well, it didn't work for this one. What do you mean? They had Bitachon, the dad, and it's like, look, it's in front of us. the Shara Bitachon told us, David HaMelech is telling us, like, why can't we just take with simplicity and sincerity and lack of cynicism the words that the Hakamim are giving us? Right? That was the lesson that Mendy was trying to share with us. Like, don't be such a chacham, don't be such a sophisticated person. Be like the emistic child, right? Like Mendel was so much like that. You take it's take it. Simple faith, right? Take it at face value. Don't try to figure it out. And that is such a big part of Bitachon, ladies. Such a huge part of Bitachon. We've all experienced it in this group, right? That a lot of the questions is the part of us that wants to be so sophisticated, right? Well, when I have this happen to my neighbor, it didn't happen, right? Stop, right? We got to tell that part of us to stop, right? David HaMelech told us, the Torah is telling us, the Rabbeim are telling us, the Shar Bitachon is telling us, like, forget about everybody else, everything else. Stop with your calculations and go to the truth of the sincerity of the text, of what the original text is telling you how to live your life, right? Don't start looking for explanations and don't calculate. Simplicity, sincerity, lack of cynicism, right? And this is what the Rebbe is saying, like, if all these beautiful qualities of this child. So going back to the choosing to be positive, here you could look at a child. Oh my gosh, how could this child be so disrespectful? Took the Rebbe's hand and he wiped his face with the Rebbe's coat. And the Rebbe's saying, what? The sincerity, the heartfulness, the simplicity, and the innocence of a child. That's what I saw right there. Of course, you know what I mean? Like, that's what he's seeing. And that is something for all of us to learn. The Rebbe is saying, if only half these qualities could be found in adults, the truth is we'd be so much better off, right? If we had that quality of tamimus, which actually in Elul, in the Hayom Yom, I should have brought it, but there was a Hayom Yom towards the end of Elul, leading up to, no, actually, it may have even been between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. It may have been at the beginning of Tishrei, where it also talks about this. In the Hayom Yom, he talks about the Frierdiker Rebbe, the sixth Rebbe, is quoting, it wasn't Rabbi Levi Yitzhak, it was Reb Susha, I believe. It was Reb Susha who was talking about 5 different paths of Teshuvah, and he was taking 5 verses from Torah, from Tanakh, and teaching us different levels, different ways to really, really make teshuvah. This was definitely before Yom Kippur, because I gave this class to somebody, to a group of ladies before Yom Kippur. And one of them, I should have brought it, my goodness. One of them, maybe next week I'll share it with you guys. One of them was again this idea. So and it was right after this event, Sherry. So this whole message is staying very fresh with me, because I do think it's very, very relevant. And because I keep stumbling upon it, I'm wondering, like, oh, God is sending me a message, right? Maybe this is something really important in your relationship with Hashem, in your teshuvah, in your coming closer to Hashem, to get rid of the cynical part of you, right? And to be a lot more simple, to be a lot more heartfelt, right? A lot more just sincere. Simple really means a purity, a sincerity, okay? Okay, so rather than reprimanding or reacting negatively to the quote-unquote disrespect of the child, wiping his face on his quote, the Rebbe chose to focus on the positive character traits expressed in such an act of loving familiarity, as though he's walking with his tati, right, with his father. That's what's going on here, right? Just sincere, like we're related. No matter the type of embarrassment, problem, or disadvantage presented to him, the Rebbe could pinpoint some hidden fulcrum within it and flip it into an advantage or benefit, like something positive, something to learn from, right? Indeed, within almost any event or conversation, there are positive and negative elements, as we know. Now, the real work is finding in those events, in those circumstances, in those conversations, the positive element, and honing on that. Okay, with practice and diligence, we too can learn to locate these inner sparks of goodness and make them glow. You know who's like that, Sherry? I think you know who's like that. My husband, right? Like, he's very much like that. I mean, obviously, but I'm like, it's something like he works on. I'm not saying he's like the Rebbe, but I'm saying, like, he's definitely to a point where sometimes would be like, Okay, it's a little annoying, right? Like, can we all be a little bit more cynical? But not my husband. It's like it drives us all a little bit crazy. Sherry's like part of the family, so she's experienced it, right? Like we'll be sharing an event, a circumstance, or whatever happened, and suddenly like he'll like, oh wow, but what about this? And he's like giving us like the whole beautiful, positive perspective. It's like, okay, we just wanted to fetch, right? And there's no fetching. There's no fetching. There's no complaining in front of him because he's already flipped it to something that's just worth celebrating, right? Okay, fine, we get it. There's really reason to celebrate here, not to complain. Okay. So here he's gonna tell us a story about a couple who once went to the Rebbe to get advice for a shidduch, right? Many people are in this the shidduch, like they call it this Megillah, right? This part or this parsha they call it, right? It's it's a thing. You have to be diligent in trying to find a match for your children. So they were trying to look for a match for their daughter. And they had something that they need, a particular person they needed to discuss that they were hesitating about because this family and this girl came from a very distinguished religious lineage, but the potential match, the match or the potential son-in-law didn't. And so they came to the Rebbe and they said, is this not a valid reservation, right? Are we like, isn't this something to be a bit concerned about and, have a little bit of a reservation about this match? And the Rebbe responded, would you have refused to take Abraham, our forefather, as your son-in-law? Look at this. Isn't this crazy? After all, his father Terach worshipped idols. Look at that. It's like a mic drop, right? Like, what? It's so true, right? Like, look how the Rebbe like flipped it. Like, are you Meshuga? You know what I mean? Like, it's like crazy. But I thought it's a great story because so much of this happens in that in this context of finding shidduchim, right? So the young man wasn't raised religiously, yet the Rebbe saw in him the glimmer of a heroic prototype, like Avram Avinu, right? He had surely shown some level of sacrifice, if not a great level of sacrifice, as any of us who've experienced this can attest, right? In departing from the environment of his upbringing, like Abraham himself. Perhaps the parents would accept him, not despite the fact that he had led an irreligious past, but because he had, right? Not because, a necessary evil. Okay, so so there's this one flaw in the guy. He's a great guy, but no, but actually because of this is that's what makes him a great shidduch for our daughter, right? Because of the conviction and courage it took to leave the familiar behind. And isn't that a great story? Isn't that so amazing? If everybody in the shidduch world would like keep this perspective, right? And so we have a similar one about Rabbi Goodnick in Australia, who once organized an event to teach Taharas HaMishpacha. Okay, here he says it was a class on marriage and motherhood. I had always heard the story that the class was on marriage and specifically family purity, but I could be wrong. Okay, whatever it was a class geared to women. Okay, and when he at an opportunity soon after that class, he had yechidus with the Rebbe, and he was really embarrassed to share with the Rebbe what had transpired in his wonderful class that the Rebbe had highly encouraged. And again, I really believe it was a Taharas HaMishpacha class. And he shared with the Rebbe that only one woman had attended, and he shared it. It was a complaint, like he put all this effort, and there's only one woman came. And the Rebbe's immediate response was, and how many mothers did Moshe Rabbeinu have? All right. We think the event is only successful if there's 200 women or 50 women or 100 women. No, it was one mother, one woman. That's like Hashem sent you the one woman, right? Like, why are we dismissing that as a negative occurrence? The Rebbe doesn't see it as a negative occurrence. It's actually something very positive. When you have this view, there's, as Mendel Kalmenson says here, there's no such thing as a failure for a virtuosic optimist, a composer of life, right? A person who has this virtue of optimism, there's no failure. For such a person, every woman or man is understood to be a potential instrument of redemption, vibrating with unsung merits that could potentially add the culminating notes to the symphony of human history, right? Just like this Baal Tshuva boy, right? There's nothing negative here. On the contrary, like this could be the most amazing. It is the most amazing shidduch, right? Look, it's like Abraham, right? There's only one woman came. Oh my gosh, one woman learned about marriage and learn about family purity. Wow, one woman. How many mothers does Moshe Rabbeinu have, right? So every situation too can be seen as part of a much wider picture if we would have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. And here it's interesting because again, the title is called Positivity is a Choice, right? And Sherry, I don't think people like going back to the example of my husband, I don't think my husband was like necessarily born like this, right? It's just something that he chooses. Like he's so emphatic about like training himself to be that way, right? Almost to the point of making all of us very annoyed because we don't work on it as hard as he does, right? So because we don't work as hard on it, it hasn't become our default. Whereas by him, it's already, I'm not saying 100% default probably, but a lot more than maybe for the rest of us. I'm speaking for myself, not for you, Sherry, but you know what I mean, right? So he says that there was a shliach of the Rebbe who once moved to an area where Jewish institutions were actually winding down, right? So, there was just not much action was going on. And some organizations had already given up on building Jewish life in that town because they didn't see any potential, right? This happens. And so the shliach was struggling. And in his shlichus, but he really pushed through. And after a number of years, almost a decade, the efforts seemed to something started to sprout. You start beginning to see the fruits of your labor, right? And suddenly, as things are sprouting, as happens very often, other organizations began investing heavily in parallel programming, right? Competing, quote unquote, air quotes, with his work and undermining, again, air quotes, everything that he had created, right? It's like, what do they say? What do they say what do you say? How do you say that word in English? Like when you copy someone, it's the best form of flattery or something, right? Right. So obviously the shliach paved the way, right? It took many years of very hard work and you didn't see the results very easily. And after a while, you start seeing a little bit. And once you start seeing that, it got a little frustrating that now everybody else is coming and now doing programming and kind of copying what I've been doing, right? So the shliach wrote to the Rebbe and asked permission to move to a different area where he would see greater success from his efforts, right? Like, why do I have to deal with this now? Like, let me just go somewhere where I could actually see the success. And the Rebbe replied, everything you have done there is having great success. You started from the alphabet, meaning from the basics in every way. And now through the institutions and activities that you and your wife have established, your city has been transformed to the degree that other religious groups are emulating you and heightening their activities. And Sherry, we can probably say the same thing. We've seen it in Houston, Texas, like, right? It happens a lot, but it's not a failure. It's actually a success. Right? It's success of those who paved the way. You could take the approach of, let me just go somewhere else where I'm going to get the credit or the recognition or I'm going to see it. I'm going to own the success. No, the success is already there. Everything that's happening. Yeah. The fact that so much is being built in terms of infrastructure, not by you, but by other people, is because you've been successful, right? So the Rebbe continues, having raised the local profile of Torah and mitzvahs, you have become a distinguished presence in the city. Again, we know it from, again, where we live, right? Widely respected by city leaders and officials. And after all this, you wonder why there are some who envy and seek to emulate you, right? So the Rebbe flipped it around. This is not a failure. This is actually your success. With one simple gesture of confidence, the Rebbe overturned the problem. The sudden growth of competition was not a sign of the shliach's failure. Rather, it was a sign of his great success. The organizations were not weeds invading the shliach's garden. They merely had learned from his example that productivity was possible in that town, and they had therefore renewed and redoubled their own efforts instead of giving up on that locale, that place. When we fully internalize the fact that there is a hidden point of goodness and godliness within every person and event, we are then able to intuitively find and connect to those holy sparks, even when they are garbed in seemingly negative behavior or circumstances. And by the way, we see, our kids, those of us, many of us have had this experience where you see like a really good teacher of our children is the one that does this, right? That is able to find, there's teachers who are kind of like, they always gravitate to find the negative thing of the child or the class or the, right? You had this experience, right? And then you have these special teachers, right? That they focus and it becomes like they highlight in the child that redeeming quality that bothers everybody else, but they're able to see how incredibly positive that is, right? And what everybody else is seeing as maybe disruptive or inattentive or whatever, or opinionated, or they're able to flip it around and turn it into an amazing quality and an asset that the child has, right? And, sometimes as parents, when we see a great teacher do it for our children, it actually helps us to say, oh my gosh, I have to be more like that teacher, right? And also, we also struggle when we find our kids in situations where their teaching environment does the opposite and kind of only focuses on the negative, which again, we all do. No child is perfect, and etc. Right? And to the point that sometimes children get crushed in a way. A teacher could be really, really clip a child's wings, or they could help the child soar by highlighting and emphasizing the positive and finding, a way to connect with the positive aspects of the child, which again, everybody does have. Okay. So here we actually turning to children, we're going to talk about children now. So here he tells us a story about Purim, right? Everybody knows Purim is, kind of like a loud holiday, Megillah reading. The kids have their graggers and the whole thing. There was once a Megillah reading I guess in 770. And the children got carried away with their enthusiastic noise making, as they often do. And some of the adults became tense because they could not hear the reading properly and attempted to quiet the children, probably in a very annoying, kind of like a very frustrated, annoying, kind of scolding type of way, which we've seen it all happen. We know that we have to hear the Megillah, every word, and it's kind of stressful because you're there and, you don't want to catch a second reading that you're there. You want to hear the whole thing and, right? But you should know that later the Rebbe addressed those adults and he said the following: in their innocence, the children were enjoying the spirit of Purim. Of course, you want to hear the reading, but we must also appreciate God's own great joy in seeing these children celebrate. So again, it's all about what we focus on. That's really the whole game. And it is a choice. It is a choice. If we set our default mode to positive, we too will be able to detect divine delight within disruption and learn to celebrate the preciousness and purity of even those who appear insensitive to the spirit and inner meaning of the mitzvot, right? So the child doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't appreciate it. He doesn't realize that, oh my gosh, like we have to hear every word, right? But if we focus on the positive, there's something to learn, like the kid who grabbed the Rebbe's coat and wiped his face on it. Here's another one. A young family came to have Yechidus, a private audience with the Rebbe. It was Hanukkah time. And the Rebbe, as is customary on Hanukkah, offered the child Hanukkah geld, right? A few coins to the child. He was giving a few coins. For whatever reason, the child, children are very, very honest, and they just, you never know what you're going to get. They just do, right? It can't be, it's not, you can't prescribe it. You can't plan it. You can't, it's going to come out, whatever. So this child, what came out is, instead of a thank you, and instead of grabbing the coins, this child rejected the coins. And after a couple of more failed attempts, and the Rebbe tried to give him the geld, the Rebbe suddenly remarked very kindly, this is a good sign. He's not somebody who craves money, right? The parents were probably so embarrassed, right? The earth can swallow me now. Like, how do I get this little kid, right? I can imagine, how to get this little kid to be more, more grateful and understand the moment, the importance of the moment, and take the coin from the Rebbe's hand, right? Instead of being so, the word is coming to me in Spanish. I don't think it means the same in English. Imprudent. I don't think it means the same. But anyway, it's a different word in Spanish. So in Spanish, it would be that word, but I don't think it means the same in English. It doesn't matter. Okay, so the word escapes me, whatever word I need right now. But instead of being so, whatever the word is, right? And here the Rebbe puts everybody at ease. And turns to the parents and said, wow, like this is a really good sign. Like we're just seeing the MS of this child. Like he's with somebody who prays money. Like it's something really good. It's going to be helpful in life, right? Rather than seeing the child's refusal, the signs of as signs of a difficult personality, the Rebbe recast his behavior as an indication of good character. By swiftly zeroing in on the good and revealing it with soul and warmth, the Rebbe healed, uplifted, educated, and encouraged everyone he encountered, and specifically these parents, right, who now did not go home scolding this child, this very innocent child, for not taking the Rebbe's guilt. Okay. There was a highly learned teacher who once reported with pride that he was opening an educational program for Russian Jews who did not even know how to read from a siddur. The Rebbe responded energetically. For them, the injunction that Torah should always remain new in your eyes can be practiced literally, right? When the Rebbe heard him say, with a little bit of he says here that the way the person said it in the comment and the tone, it kind of was revealing to the Rebbe that he has a little bit of subtle, very subtly, he looked down a little bit upon the student's lack of knowledge, right? And the Rebbe took that in his characteristic loving way. He leveraged the conversation to help this teacher see the student in a different light. Oh my goodness, right? The commandment that you should see the Torah should always remain new, right? To you, it should be fresh and new. You should be excited. They are literally practicing this, right? Okay, so while unfortunate circumstances had not allowed these students the benefit of a Jewish education, these very circumstances allowed them to approach Torah with open-eyed curiosity and creativity, which is exactly what everybody else should have, right? What are you going back to the simplicity, the sincerity, the curiosity, right? That's what everybody else should have, right? They even possessed an advantage over seasoned scholars whose knowledge can paradoxically preclude or obscure novel approaches to a given subject of study. In our final example, it is noteworthy that the Rebbe lived the same advice he gave to others and applied his signature positivity bias to his own challenges, even in matters of life and death. And here's the example. So now he's going to give us an example of the Rebbe's own life. The Rebbe had a heart attack, many of you know, on Shmini Atzeres. We just came out of Shmini Atzeres, 5738, okay? During Hakafos, I think during the fourth Hakafa, 1977, he suffered a pretty serious heart attack, okay? Now, 2 days later, the Rebbe insisted on on speaking at a Farbrengen, as he had done on that particular day for the previous 38 years. And the doctor, I don't know if it was Dr. Weiss or Dr. Resnick, I'm guessing it was probably Dr. Weiss, insisted you must take care of your health. If not, there is a 25% chance of a relapse. And the doctor asked the Rebbe if he understood what he had said, right? You just want to make sure that your patient knows what you said. Like the doctor, I think it was Dr. Weiss, was saying, look, if you don't take this seriously, if you don't take what just happened 48 hours ago, and we're trying to, treat the Rebbe here, there's a 25% chance of a relapse. Do you understand what we're saying? So the Rebbe says, oh, yes, said the Rebbe with a smile. You said that even if I don't take care of my health, which I assure you I will, there is a 75% chance that there won't be a relapse. You see what the Rebbe did there? Right, Sherry? It's kind of like being with Matt. I mean, I'm not obviously like the Rebbe's the Rebbe, but I'm saying like Matt will do that to us at the Shabbos table. And we're like, okay, right? Right? That's the Rebbe. Oh, so I get what you're saying. There's a 75% chance that there won't be a relapse. So the Rebbe's positive paraphrasing of life might seem radical to some people. It's like, what? Right? Because again, we're cynical. Like we've developed that cynic in us. We've developed that person who can kind of like, it's like we take that, we're able to bring in kind of the negative as it's almost like a defense mechanism, like, oh, because the shoe can drop anytime. So let me just always cover my bases by knowing everything that can go wrong and everything that is negative about this. It protects me, right? Sort of, but it's all nonsense. It's just a trick of the Yetzer Hara to keep us tethered tethered to worry and anxiety and to ego and to think that we run the world and we control everything, right? And freeing ourselves from that is exactly what's happening here, right? It's getting rid of the cynic who knows everything and looking at things with a much more simple, truthful, honest way, right? Looking at things in the positive light is actually the emes way of doing it, okay? So Rebbe is saying that even though this might seem radical to some people, in fact, it's a necessary perspective for all of us to engage in to the best of our abilities. Like, we need it. We think it's better for us to be a little bit more negative, more protective of our feelings, more like, no, actually, how's that working for us, right? Everybody's a nervous wreck. Everybody's anxious. Everybody has, beef with somebody else, with a neighbor, with a family member, with like, hello, how's that working for you people, right? If we apply some of the Rebbe's optimism to our own lives, problems would be revealed as potentials for growth, enemies would be understood as teachers, and setbacks would be seen for what they really are, springboards to the next level. And by the way, in parenting, we would have a much better relationship with our children. Our children would be thriving more, right? There would be less of, marital discord, right? This also affects Shalom Bayit, like all of this. So let that be a good message for us to try to, maybe that's something we can try this week, even if it's one time, right? And when our friend is telling us a story that's taking a negative spin, try to find what's the redeeming aspect in the story, right? Like there's always something, right? Like, right. And try to us be the ones who initiate bringing that perspective into the conversation. And it could be a conversation with ourselves. It could be a conversation with a family member, with a friend, right? And the way we analyze a certain situation that we come across, let's try to be the ones who try to find that redeeming. And maybe we can share next week. We can bring a little bit of how that went, if we had that opportunity, and how we took that into practice. So since we have 10 more minutes, I'm going to actually turn to another chapter of this book, of the daily dose of Pesukim and Bitachon, where the chapter is chapter 88. He talks about something he calls instinctive Bitachon. So I think also it kind of has to do with this, to try to make this kind of like our default, okay? So the verse in Tehillim that he's going to analyze here for us is 130, Tehillim 130, verse 5. He says, I placed my hope in Hashem, my soul hoped, and for his word I wait. So what does it mean, Rabbi Satan asks, what does it mean for a soul to hope? And he says that Rabbeinu Yonah in Mishlei, analyzing Mishlei, examines different levels of hope. Some people, he says, feel that Hashem is involved in the world in a general sense, right? Of course, Hashem is involved. He gives us air to breathe and a functioning body. They believe that Hashem gave them the talents and the opportunities through which they can earn a living, and perhaps even directed them to a certain house in a certain community, to a certain job, a certain career, right? And having this understanding gives them a overall sense of security in their lives, which is fine and good. It's already a very good thing, right? However, right, and this is the part where we all need to work on a little bit more, possibly, we don't have that same trust when it comes to the details, right? To the big things, yes, of course, I found my shidduch and it was like this, and it was only Hashem could have orchestrated, right? And, whatever my career is, my job or whatever, right? On the house and the place I ended up living, right? When the coffee arrives cold, when the road is clogged with traffic, when the waiter brings you the wrong order, when the baby keeps them up all night, their heart pounds with stress, right? The little things, and I remember, and at one of the very, very early classes that we had in Bitachon, I think it wasn't Shar Bitachon, I think it was the Beis Levi. I think it was Sherry, it was your sister, beautifully said this. She's like, for the big things, it comes so easy to me. But when it comes to the little things, it's exactly what it's saying. And I remember saying, you're not unique. That's everybody's struggle, right? For the big things, like the plane, I don't know, I can't control the plane. Like, of course, now I'm in your hands, Hashem, the big medical, procedure, whatever, Hashem, I'm in your hands. But when it comes with the little things, the child that is really testing us, right? Or the thing that our spouse did, or, what the principal in school is doing, or the teacher, or again, the order went wrong, whatever it is, right? Are we actually behaving in a way that shows that we are relying that God is the one behind all of this. And it obviously is for my good. And there's nothing for me to get emotionally off kilter about. Such people display the polar opposite of the axiom, don't sweat the small stuff. The small stuff is exactly what stirs their anxiety because those are the things they think should be in their control. And that is the biggest lie, right? And again, it's that is a problem. We think that we are in charge of those things, right? But it's actually all a lie. We're not in charge of the little things in the same way that we're not in charge of the big things. So when it comes to the big things, it becomes very obvious. But the little things, oh no, I control that, right? And so but that's where the exercise really happens, right? The daily living of bitachon happens in those little things. And the more we can practice it with the little things, the more toned the muscle is going to be to use it in the big things, as we've said so many times. When our soul, not just our brain, places hope in Hashem, we realize that even these small details of life are out of our hands. We place our hope in him and count on his kindness for everything. Rabbeinu Yonah says that this outlook is very honorable because this conditioning will help your soul to acquire bitachon. So again, it's a conditioning, right? It's a choice that we make to condition or train ourselves to be this way. Many people are intellectually attuned to bitachon, right? That's Michael Safdie was saying the other day, I think it was before Sukkot or Chol HaMoed maybe, that somebody called and said, I've learned the book 25 times and I still, I'm still nervous. I'm still anxious. I'm like it's here, like 25 times it's here, but it's not, it didn't come down. It didn't come down. We have to bring it down, right? It can't just be an intellectual test that if I give you a test now, what does it say in chapter 3 of Shar Bitachon? And what does it say about the 7 trustworthy qualities? You can list them. Okay. And do you apply it? Right? Does it come to you when you are in your daily life? Right? Some might even have bitachon in their hearts and their emotions. And that's obviously a greater level because it is an emotional, it's an emotion, right? But when the soul trusts in Hashem, bitachon is in a person's gut. It became the default mode of behavior, right? It is his instinctive response to every event, every person, every detail in life. The secret of this level of bitachon, says Rabbeinu Yonah, is the hope regarding the individual's small, ordinary deeds. Rabbeinu Yonah, a master bitachon, is informing us that we can reach this level only by constantly conditioning ourselves to rely on Hashem for the details of life. So it's like this is like an exercise, right? It's an exercise regimen. We have to practice it every day. You have to exercise the muscle. We can practice using this perspective easily because the events to which we apply it are not the big, frightening ones, right? They're the easy, small, like he was saying, like the don't sweat the small stuff type of things. For example, when a man gets up in the morning and goes to shul, he can stir a spark of realization in his own mind that he's only getting there with Hashem's kindness. If he thinks I can handle this myself, he's failing to realize that Hashem handles everything. So here he gives us an analogy, a mashal from Rabbi Yosef Zalman Bloch. And the mashal, the analogy is the following, that there was a wealthy man who was traveling. And in his travels, he spotted a pile of rags on the side of the road. So he got out of his wagon to investigate and see what is this pile of rags doing on the side of the road. And he discovered that it wasn't a pile of rags. It was actually a poor, sick person. So the wealthy man was overcome with pity, and he went and he took the man to a place where they could give him medical care, and he paid for his treatment, and they had him, restored to health and cleaned up and everything. And when the man recovered, he helped him rehabilitate himself. When the man was ready, this wealthy person brought him into his business and trained him, and eventually he even married him off, and he found him a place to live, and give him back a dignified life. And at the end of Sheva Brachos, the benefactor who had helped him so much offered the groom to offered a cup of tea, right, to bring to the groom. And the groom, which had been this poor person from the side of the road, says, "No thanks, I don't want to be obligated to you." So the benefactor was shocked. "You don't want to be obligated to me?" if you lived 1,000 years, you couldn't pay me back for what I've done for you, right? Like that's crazy. Like, excuse me? Like this just means that when you look back on everything I've done, you see it as nothing, right? So obviously it's a story. It's not that we shouldn't be like that. Like we shouldn't say that to a person with a hint of arrogance. It's meaning to say, like, what is this person thinking? Like they don't owe me anything. Like, they're not going to be indebted for me for the cup of tea. Like, look what everything that I do, right? It's not about the person. It's about the situation of how can we be so weak in our recognition of what Hashem has done for us, right? That we think from the beginning of time, as it says in the Shar Bitachon, he has a solid track record, is one of the qualities, right? From the beginning of time until now, right? How can we be so weak in understanding how indebted we are to Hashem, right? So as members of humanity, as Jews, as individuals, we've been the recipients of endless miracles and acts of kindness. We are here only because of Hashem's kindness, right? So having the attitude of, I'll take care of this myself, I don't want to bother God, I don't owe God, right, is a statement, or I don't want to owe God, is a statement of misplaced humility. Every time a small thing goes wrong, we have the opportunity to remind ourselves that we need Hashem for the small things too. As we do this, Bitachon will seep into our soul. And I will turn this a little bit into the positive, that every time a small thing goes right, which is 99% of the time, we have the opportunity to thank Hashem, to remind ourselves who is the one that is making it go right. And this is also a way for us to train ourselves and let the bitachon reap into our soul. So here in the recap, he says, bitachon of the soul is an instinctive gut reaction to events big and small in life. And we build this level of bitachon by recognizing Hashem's involvement in not only the overall functioning, but also the details of every day. Okay, very nice. Okay, so that is our class for today. Any comments, any stories, any questions?